Phil Barnhart. Thank you very much, Phil.
Well, thank you. It's great. It's great to be here today, and I am still learning how to do this this Zoom system. Can you hear me? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have.
And you're on the screen already.
I'm sorry.
Your program is on the screen.
Yeah, good. I was hoping that was the case. I'm not coming up under the speaker view, so I was wondering if the mic was working, but I guess it is. That's great. I want to start with a couple minutes on 5 billion years. Basically, to talk about the interactive natural systems that exist on the Earth and what those mean to us as we talk about electric vehicles. I'm trying to set the stage for what we're for the point of discussing electric vehicles at all. There are basically 4 main systems on the Earth: the lithosphere, the rocky foundation, the hydrosphere, the oceans, the lakes and rivers, the atmosphere, the air, and then the biosphere, all the living things, including us. And the interesting thing is that all of this is powered by energy from the sun. There is no energy on the Earth or available energy on the Earth that didn't originally come from the sun. All of these systems are dynamic, they're constantly changing, they're influencing each other, they balance each other, and changes in one lead to changes in all of them. So if we flash forward through 5 billion years or so, from the Earth cooling to today, the biosphere, life, pervades all the other systems. All 4 interact all the time, but in the last 4 billion years, the biosphere has shaped the others. Now we have a nitrogen-based atmosphere, which is rich in oxygen, mediated by the biosphere. The seas now are not much different than they've been a million years ago, but that's because of the life that actually changed the way things work on the planet. It used to be that carbon dioxide was the primary gas that was loose, and now virtually all the carbon is locked away, quietly stored away in the lithosphere as other minerals. And it's happened over the last billion years or so since life has started on the planet. Now I'm going to fast forward. The last million years, to 250,000 years ago, is the beginning of our direct ancestors, people we would recognize today as humans. At the beginning, most were hunter-gatherers. They were very suited for the rapidly changing weather and climate that the planet had 1 million to 250,000 years ago. Our ancestors had a small population. They could eat practically anything. And they moved around a lot based on what was available, so that when an area dried out or became too hot or too cold, they could move to a different place where they could live. About 11,000 years ago, the weather stabilized. I'm not certain exactly why that happened, but it did. And that balance is maintained in the climate and the weather ever since then, until about 200 years ago. And during that time, it was possible to live in one place, to plant the same crops over and over again, so that we ended up with an agricultural-based economy. And of course, 90+% of everybody lived by growing plants or raising herds in order to feed the other 10%, or maybe more like 3 or 4%, during most of that 11,000 years. Of course, it was during that time the ancient civilizations developed, writing, and the development of science, and on and on. 200 years ago, the Industrial Revolution started. Now you think about that, it's very, very recent. My great-grandfather was born in 1818. My father was born in 1918. So in 4 generations, we've come from essentially the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to today. Let's see if I can bring up I'm going to have to get over here. Let's get over here. Bring up the first slide. What's happened during that time is that we vastly increased our use of energy, especially fossil fuels. And what I've shown you on the graph are the temperature changes in the squiggly orange line And the carbon dioxide changes in the atmosphere. Now, the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is a very, very small portion of the atmosphere. Started out about 280 parts per million, and it's up to 410. And you wouldn't think that amounts to anything, except that it becomes a way in which the normal solar radiation that radiates out from the Earth after bouncing off of our atmosphere, off of the ground, off the water, off of the ice in the Arctic, and back out into space, it's kept our temperatures regulated. Carbon dioxide is one of those gases called greenhouse gas, which has the effect of bouncing much of that energy back in so that it stays locked in our atmosphere, and therefore the temperatures rise. And you can see the direct correlation between the increase in carbon dioxide in our atmosphere caused by the Industrial Revolution and the change in temperature. And so that is the sort of the thing that gets us started with where we are today. We're entering a new period of instability caused by our own population growth, which, by the way, follows that carbon line almost directly, the population growth that we've had as a result of the development of manufacturing, development of modern agriculture, the ability to raise a lot more food, and all the science that goes into healthcare. So all those things are perfectly natural. Now, here's the problem. When the atmosphere, when the climate and the weather has changed significantly in the past in an area, anybody who can't move, there tends to be a catastrophic population collapse. Many species become extinct as the biosphere changes to adjust to whatever the new cause was. In this case, the carbon that we and other greenhouse gases that we have added to the atmosphere in the meantime. So how do we head that off? If we act fast, we may be able to do that. Here's a graph of what we look like today. We would need 5 Earths just to deal with the carbon dioxide that Americans add to the atmosphere. In order to deal with that as a renewable process using natural processes. And you can see that many of the larger countries in the world are multiples of 1 Earth. And somehow or another, we need to get that down. So here's what where the American carbon emissions come from. 28% is from transportation. Now, 65% of our local direct greenhouse gas emissions comes from transportation. So Eugene, Springfield, Dane County, about 65% of the direct things that we have direct control over come from transportation. Our food is about 14%. So if you reduce the amount of meat you eat, you can reduce that. Home heating and cooling, insulate your house, get a heat pump, do some other things. I also electrify, get our electricity more from renewables instead of from coal. Oregon still gets a lot of its energy from coal, but that's going down, and it will basically be gone in the next few years. So those are among the things we have to deal with. And of course, we've already seen what happens with the change in our climate and the change in the coming of the droughts and so forth. You can see on the right people playing golf with a forest fire behind them. I hope most of the Oregonians don't do that, but we've seen much worse fires lately than we had in the past. So that's where we are, and these are the things that need to change, that need to happen. Now, some of those things are not things that you and I can do much about directly. But we can change our personal behavior, and we can do things to protect ourselves and our families from this. Now, just like the pandemic that we've had, we have made some major changes in our lives, like this meeting by Zoom instead of directly, as a result of the changes we needed to make in order to deal with the virus. So I'm heartened by the fact that it's become clear that we actually can make those changes. And among the things that have happened as a result of that is significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions around the world during the time of the lockdown. Most of it was transportation fuels. Some of it had to do with manufacturing and some other things. But if you look at this map of China, pictures taken from space, nitrous oxide density in China, you can see that on the left is the picture from January, and the right is the picture after the lockdown. when it actually cleaned out. So our carbon emissions and nitrous oxide emissions around the world declined something like will have declined by the end of this year, something like 7%, just based on the lockdown that we have dealt with. Now I want to go on and talk a little bit about the things that we actually can do ourselves to make a difference. And I can see I have messed up my notes, but let me see if I can get us back here to it. There are changes that we can make ourselves that will make a difference, and it will matter. And one of those is in the decisions that we make about how we're going to get around. And I want to talk about basically the three areas, maybe four areas in which that's the case today. One is the transition from gasoline-powered cars to electric vehicles. One is the transition of lane transit districts to electric buses. One is the use of electric tractors to pull our heavy vehicles. And then finally, things like e-bikes and the sort. So in 2012, buying a Tesla Model S, which you see on your screen now, seemed like a really risky proposition. But I was already very concerned about the climate emergency. I very much wanted Tesla to succeed in forcing a shift in how we fuel our vehicles. And I wanted to make a statement to my colleagues in the legislature that the era of electric vehicles, EVs, had arrived. I needed an EV that could get me the 135-mile round trip to Salem and back every day in every kind of weather, safely and reliably. My Model S did that in spades. I've lost track of, oh yes. And as a bonus, as a great bonus, it was a lot of fun to drive. It still is. The other readily available electric models now are things like the Nissan Leaf. Here's a sort of a list of what was available worldwide and the relative sales among cars worldwide from January to October of last year. That was the most recent list I could find. And Mr. Chair, I think you probably have locked your screen so that everyone's looking at you. I'm making that up. I'm not guessing. I'm guessing that's the case. Here is a Model 3 on the snow. Very good snow car, by the way. And a new Model Y. There it is again from Tesla. But here is the Volkswagen ID3, which is coming out soon. Also a 200-mile plus car. And there is the Volkswagen Transporter. Anybody remember the old hippie bus? This is the new version that will be coming out next year or the year after. Here is the new Leaf. As we heard from Linda, I think it was. Was it Linda? About the Leaf that she has. This new Leaf will go over 230 miles on one charge, unlike hers. And this is the Jaguar I-Pace. I saw one of these in Salem last year, so they're available in town. They're fairly expensive, but they also do really well. From Korea, South Korea, Kia Niro, and the Hyundai Kona Electric. Let's see, why am I not moving? And locally, of course, we have the Arcimoto Pulse, which Mark Thormeyer is selling, building in Eugene and selling primarily for first responders to use to get to places that are hard for them to get to with their big fire trucks, and for the last mile delivery. He's going to sell a bunch of them in New York City and in other crowded places where you don't want to have big delivery trucks blocking the road. This kind of vehicle with a box on the back will become available for that, and that'd be very good. I'm going to skip a couple of pages. You can see that we're going to be able to replace most of the ICE vehicles very quickly, and I'll talk more about trucks a little bit later. My now old 2012 Model S charged overnight in my garage on what, there's another picture of the Chevy Bolt. Let's see if I can get you to it. There it is. Charged overnight in my garage. In 2012, there was nowhere else to charge. Now there are thousands of electric vehicle chargers in Oregon, and you can travel nearly anywhere and expect to find fast charging along the way. Tesla continues to build out its supercharger network. Oregon maintains its Oregon Electric Highway. Volkswagen is rapidly building out its Electrify America, and private vendors are adding even more. There's a new a fast charger, for example, in Burns, installed by the local electric cooperative, the electric utility. And hotels and others all around the country are busily establishing their overnight chargers, and more are coming. Most EVs will have updated their navigation software over the air, as Tesla's done since 2012. And that will include locations for chargers, their availability, and amenities nearby. So if you tell the car where you're going, it will tell you where to fuel, how long it will take, usually about the time it takes for us old guys to use the facilities and get another cup of coffee. The drivetrain of an EV is vastly simpler. Let's back up because come on. The drivetrain of an EV is vastly simpler than an ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle, and much easier to maintain. There's no oil change, no engine filters, there's no timing belts. There's just one fluid that you better remember to replace, and you got to do it regularly. And that's the windshield wiper fluid. An AC electric motor has one major moving part and a few bearings. An ICE has thousands more, any of which could require attention at any time. Nearly all EVs are very fun to drive. They're quiet, responsive, solid in turns, and accelerate quickly. Even low-powered EVs have acceleration from 0 to 25 miles per hour, like Linda's Leaf, fast enough to change lanes in front of that Mustang that stopped at the light next to you. EVs start from a stop instantly and have no gears that need shifting. A couple of times on the freeway, an emergency situation has arisen that led me to think that the best way out was to speed up quickly. I did. No accident. Such a maneuver would be impossible in any ICE car that I've ever driven. EVs are quiet, vibration-free, very comfortable. Most EV owners would never willingly return to ICE vehicles. You'll need to experience one for yourself in order to know really why. An EV is also vastly more efficient than an internal combustion engine car, and costs less to fuel as well. EVs are 90 to 95% efficient in their use of fuel, and ICE is only 20 to 25%. As gas or diesel is burned, most of the energy goes off as heat. Not so for EVs. EVs constructed properly can be the safest cars on the road. Motors are small. You look at the picture, there's a motor in the front, this one, and a little tiny one. Maybe this is the back, and a little tiny one in the front. And so it's all-wheel. This is an all-wheel drive car. They have big crumple zones in case of an accident. And batteries in all the newer EVs are mounted between the wheels. That's this big thing in the middle here, making it almost impossible to roll the car over because the center of gravity is so low. Tesla models have routinely received the highest safety ratings, and other EVs do as well, too. And now I want to talk a little bit about about Lane Transit District and what has happened. During the COVID, you are all pretty familiar, I think, with Lane Transit District and our bus system. Lane Transit District during the COVID-19 emergency has significantly changed the way it operates. And you'll notice on the left, the weekday service that it had before the lockdown, the Saturday service that it was running for a while, the enhanced Sunday service that it ran for a while after that, and the new COVID service that it's running now. It went from about 38,000 ridership per day down to about 10,000 riders per day. But these are people who really have to get around and don't have a car or other easy means of transportation when they're riding the bus. So that's been really important. They have laid off some of their administrative staff. They take the temperatures of their drivers and other people. They've changed the routes. They're only allowing 20 people on a 40-foot bus. or 30 people on a 60-foot bus, and they're not collecting any fares right now. And it's designed for essential trips only. There was a pilot study that Lane Transit District did on their greenhouse gas emissions, and I'm showing you a graph of what their results were. Most of the greenhouse gas emissions came from their diesel fuel, and you can see, looking at the graph, of some of the other things that they use. But despite of the fact that buses are significantly polluting, they still, and this graph is not showing up, and I don't know why, they still are showing, let's see if it works again. No, not going to do it. Oh, there it comes. They're still showing a significant benefit over people driving their own cars. They're 12,000 tons of emission, significantly better than people drove their own cars, even now. But Lane Transit District is also busy working on, and let's see if I can do this. It's also working on buying electric vehicles. Now, hopefully, I have a picture that's going to come up soon, I hope, to show that. There it is. They have been experimenting with two electric vehicles. One is the electric bus, 40-foot electric bus, which they're going to buy 11 of, which will replace about 13–14% of their fleet. And then the downtown MGO, which is currently not being used because you can't do social distancing in that little vehicle. But that was a way of getting people around downtown that they're also experimenting with. That is what I want to say about LTD, and I'll be happy to answer questions if you have any, if I know the answers. A lot of them I don't. I want to also note that a lot of developments happening right now with e-bikes, electrically bikes that electrically assist, so you can go up and down hills while you'd simply ride the bike as a normal bike during flat times. And also, there's a whole variety of other small vehicles that people are electrifying in order to deal with that. Now, I want to also talk a little bit about trucks. First, about pickup trucks. There's a lot of people drive those. This is a picture of Tesla's new Cybertruck. And if you've never seen one before, it looks really strange. But that is, they've already got 400,000 reservations. So I expect they're going to sell a bunch of them. There's an image of what it looks like on the inside with the 2 ranks of seats. And there's another image of what it looks like from the back. So it really is a real pickup. And it has a rollout cover that rolls down to cover whatever's in the bed. So a workman could keep his tools and such in there, and also to use the drive battery for electric power to operate his saws and other gizmos while he's on the job site, even if there's no power available on the site itself.
Phil?
Yes.
Can I ask, that's right. Do you have any idea how much this is going for? It looks pretty amazing.
The 250-mile range truck will sell for around $40,000. So it makes it less expensive than some of the tricked out gasoline-powered trucks. And the 500-mile range truck will sell for probably about $10,000 more than that. So it still will cost less than an F-350 that's all tricked out, or vehicles of that sort. And it will pull a gigantic load, and I can't remember the number, but you can add a trailer to it and pull a great deal. There's a picture of it that shows it dragging a Ford diesel-powered truck backwards, when they hook the two together to see if you can do a pull. This truck, that's an unfair advantage because it's a lot heavier because of the battery than the Ford. This is the new truck it's going to be built in Lordstown by a combination of using the old factory from General Motors, the investments from Amazon and others, And that should be coming out next year. That looks much more like a conventional pickup, but it also will sell for about $50,000, if I remember correctly. But now we're also there also will be on the road, and there is now on the road, the Tesla. The semis in testing, and they're using, Tesla's using these trucks now to move batteries from their factory, the battery factory in Nevada, over the mountains to Fremont, California, where they assemble their cars to move those batteries. They haven't sold any of them yet, but they're supposed to be selling them for about $150,000 for the short range 300-mile truck, and about $180,000 for the longer range truck. By the time you account for the difference in fueling costs, these trucks for operations are vastly less expensive than operating a diesel tractor. And about 2/3 of all the trips that are made by large trucks are 300 miles or less. So, you know, the ones you see on the highway that are going from Los Angeles to Seattle are in a minority. It'll be a while before those are electrified, but if you can charge up at your starting point and charge up again when you get to your stopping point 275 miles away, this truck will easily replace a diesel tractor. There's an image of the inside that the driver sees of this truck from the semi. Now, in Portland, we are building electric tractors now. There is a Class 8 truck and a medium truck built by Freightliner. I don't know what the price of those are going to be, but that sure looks like a standard. Those are standard looking trucks, aren't they? They're also completely battery powered. This one has the one on the left has a motor on each of the drive wheels, so that it has a lot of motors, and it will be able to run, I think, 250 to 300 miles. I'm going to cut to the chase. The time of emergency is upon us. I think I've illustrated that. Drastic action is needed. Most of us are going to drive cars. We're just used to that. And we do it out of habit. So the question that most of us have is, how do we get over our inertia and fear of the new and the unknown and make the transition to electric vehicles? And I propose a stepwise approach. My advice first, whatever else you do, is never buy another internal combustion engine vehicle. Emphasis on the word new. If you have to have a vehicle that you cannot get an electric for, you can't get one yet that you can afford to pay for, buy an older used gasoline-powered car and use that one for the time being to do the thing that you absolutely can't get by with a new electric. But you have to be aware that the resale value of a new ICE car that you purchase now is likely to fall off the bottom or be non-existent in a few years. The value of those vehicles is declining rapidly now. At some point, the policymakers will wake up and significantly raise the price of gasoline, restrict where your ICE car can drive, or add other costs. Don't be caught with a nearly new ICE vehicle when that happens. If the EV you need is not available today, as it soon will be, drive the old jalopy another year or two. Second, keep track of your daily mileage and expense of your current vehicle. Most people drive 30 miles or less, and most take far fewer long trips than they want to be prepared for. You then will have a good idea what sort of EV you'll actually need. There are many short-range used EVs that have all measures of low fuel and maintenance costs and high reliability that can be had for low prices. Even if you are among the 25% that buy new electric cars, understanding what you really need is the first step in obtaining the right EV at a price you can afford. If you drive a lot of miles, your fuel savings with an EV might very well make the monthly payment on your car. After a few years from now, new EV sales, there will be used EVs at good prices for the rest of us. And of course, Linda's already told us, for those who got here early, that you can get a used Leaf at an extremely good price today. Third, learn from current EV drivers. Many are excited about their EVs and will be happy to share what they know. And that is part of why I helped to organize the Emerald Valley Electric Vehicle Association. And I'll show you the website and the contact information on the next page. The people who belong to that group drive electric cars. They're very much involved in it. They're happy to answer your questions about EVs, and some of them will even let you drive theirs so you can learn about it. Just as we have learned to stay safe together by staying separate during the pandemic, we can learn to make the transition to electric transportation, make driving fun again, and help save the planet too. And so what I've got listed up here now are the main references to on the internet. Cleantechnica.com it publishes every day various articles about clean energy, and has a really good search engine. So you want to know anything much about any car, enter in their search, and they probably have an article about it. Pluginamerica.org promotes electric vehicles and has a very good website. Plugstar.com has a good searchable system for available electric vehicles. You enter your zip code, tell it what you want and what your needs are, how many passengers you want to carry, and so forth, and it will tell you what's available in our area. And then finally, the Electric Auto Association, electricauto.org, is the worldwide club of electric vehicle users that the Emerald Valley Electric Vehicle Association is a part of. So that's my talk. I hope that there's some questions. We have, I think, a few minutes. I took longer than I should have, and I apologize for that. But I hope there's some other questions that I can answer. And Mr. Chair, you're on mute.
Oh, yeah. I want to ask about, because you've mentioned some things that might be happening for farm vehicles and for farm use.
Oh, yeah.
And if you could share a little bit more about that, I think it would be really interesting.
Well, one of the big issues in Oregon around the politics of it is that the big oil companies have done a really good job of propagandizing rural folks. And rural people are scared to death of the increases in gasoline prices and other things that might happen, even though the changes are really modest. What's happening here, though, is that those farmers who have figured out how to electrify their equipment are actually saving buckets of money, not buying diesel. Some of them have installed solar panels or wind generators to power their vehicles. Now, here's the thing. Caterpillar, Cummins, the big green guy, the name not coming to me right at the moment, all make equipment that is very, very sturdy and lasts for a long, long time. There are people now, in fact, most of those companies are now building retrofit kits that allow you to take the diesel engine out and the gasoline tank out and install instead an electric motor and a battery system, which you then can charge using your own solar panels and your own on-place storage system. People who have done that already are going to save buckets of money not buying diesel and maybe generating their own power. When it becomes time to rebuild that diesel engine, which will happen long before the equipment wears out, you simply take it out and replace it with this electric kit. And you're back.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was just wondering how long, say you're driving over to the coast and you make it over there and you have to charge again. How long does the recharge take in a situation like that?
Well, here's another suggestion, and I didn't put this one up, but what I would do is go to plugshare.com, plugshare.com, or maybe it's .org, I'm not sure, you look it up. And it will show you, after you manipulate it a little bit, all the chargers that are available. There are basically three kinds of charging. There's the kind that Linda does at home, where she plugs her car into a standard outlet. There is a level 2 charger, which we talked about a little bit. Looks like a dryer plug, and that's the kind I use. And the kind that's available at hotels and such that charge overnight. And then there's DC fast chargers. Depending upon what kind of car you get, you can use the DC fast chargers that are being installed more and more all over the place. Plug in America is installing electric DC fast chargers at Walmart stores. Of course, they're all over the place now too. Oregon Electric Highway has a number of them along the coast. And of course, Tesla is the granddaddy because it has a lot of superchargers. There are superchargers in Lincoln City, further north in, I think, Tillamook, maybe Astoria, further south in Coos Bay, Bandon. My wife and I drove her Model X from San Francisco up the coast road and then turned inland at Reedsport in a nasty storm in the middle of the winter, charging either at the motels where we stayed at overnight or at superchargers along the way. And we actually used one of the Oregon Electric Highway chargers that was in Reedsport because I thought we needed it to get over the Coast Range and on up the freeway because the wind was blowing against us and the car was not getting good range. So there's a lot of options. And my recommendation is, if you have a favorite trip you like to make, I would be looking for what the chargers are that are available and learn about how they work and what the car you're thinking about buying uses. If you're going to travel, make certain that the car you want has the capability of DC fast charging. Believe it or not, some of these cars can still only charge on level 2 or slower. So it takes overnight to charge them. But the DC fast charger, you can charge even the slowest of them will charge your car in an hour and a half. And that means, you can go shopping in Lincoln City or whatever and come back and your car's charged. The fast chargers, like the supercharger, will charge a Model 3 or a Model Y, the Tesla small SUV, in about 25 minutes. So that's why I said that's the amount of time it takes me to find the facilities, grab some lunch or get another cup of coffee. So the world has changed. When I first started driving my car, I could charge at home. That was it. That simply isn't a problem anymore. Is that helpful if I answered your question?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got one question for you too, Phil. I'm curious about, at least from a policy perspective.
Sure.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
These are great, love the presentation, but I'm also curious if what your knowledge of or what your thoughts are of how state planning for this in the long term. So given that electrical production in the US, it's still like 2/3 fossil fuels, or like it's a quarter, it still comes from coal.
Yes.
So if we increase the burden and the demand on electricity, like it's on some end, we still need to have, dirty fuels producing that stuff.
Yeah.
Or even like in Washington State, it means increased hydroelectric production, which means damming more rivers.
Right.
I have no knowledge of it. So are there any active, any active work by states to kind of counter that?
Yeah, let me hit the high point. Oregon has mandated that all of the coal-fired power that comes into Oregon will be gone by 2045. My belief is, and of course a lot of that comes from Wyoming, from the big coal mines there, that they run 5 or 6 or 8 coal-fired generators, 2 or 3 of which have already closed, believe it or not, because of the lack of demand. A lot of the Washington hydroelectric power goes to the oil refineries in Seattle. When we stop burning oil, that electricity becomes available for charging electric cars. And because electric cars are so much more efficient, there may not need to be much more supply from our hydroelectric system, especially if we charge at night, which we can do away from peak hours. Most of us will be charging at night all the time, and that reduces the addition that you need to make in the grid infrastructure. Last week, I attended a meeting in which they talked about exactly this topic, and the experts tell me that electrifying transportation is the easy stuff. It's the easy stuff. Electrifying the space heating, where we get a lot of space heat from natural gas, is going to be much harder. Now, let me just give you one example of how electricity is changing, or maybe 2. In the last 100 days, renewables have outdone coal on electricity production. And the coal-fired power plants are closing all over the country at a very rapid clip because they're simply not economical anymore. Very soon, they will be gone. And my belief is that 2045, that long before the state mandate that they be closed, that they will be gone, and we won't have any more coal-fired power in Oregon. The final thing I wanted to illustrate is that one of the Indiana power companies wrote to their PUC their 30-year plan. And their plan was basically to continue using the big fossil fuel plants. Indiana is a big coal producer. And the PUC, the Public Utility Commission, wrote back to them and said, no, we need to have you actually do a study and do a 30-year study and figure out what's going to be the cheapest way to provide power for your customers. And they did. And what they discovered was that they should close all of their coal-fired power plants. They should keep one of their gas-fired plants available for peaking power when they really needed it. And all the rest of their energy should come from wind and solar. And so they are in the process of doing that now. Utilities all over the country are discovering that the cheapest power that you can use is solar and wind. And they're finding out ways to make this power usable, even though you don't get any solar at night and you don't get any wind when the wind isn't blowing. If that turns out not to be a big issue, there are ways around it, and that's happening. So then the very final point, even in the worst coal-fired power plant places, an electric car is so much more efficient than a gas-fired car that coal-fired electricity still produces less pollution than the same car powered by gasoline. I didn't know that. I didn't believe that when I first heard it, but the studies are clear and it's true.
So thank you so much. That fills a big gap in my knowledge.
So Phil, thank you for your presentation today. I see that people are leaving in terms of the participants because they have other obligations.
Sure.
If you have to leave the meeting now, please do that. If you have a question for Phil, can you hang on for another couple of minutes in case somebody has a question?
Absolutely. I'm very happy to do that.
Thank you so much for your information and your passion. And I'm one of the guys that has to leave. So thank you. And I hope our paths cross soon.
Great. I appreciate it. I hope
Thank you.
So other questions we haven't already hit? I'll take
Well, I have another question, and I'm very excited to see these trucks that are coming on, the Tesla truck and these huge semis. That's amazing. But one of the most popular cars will always be, the like a recreational vehicle. Like we have a CRV. Also, we have. There's so many families need a car that has lots of seats and so on. Is there anything that's now planned for replacing that huge, there's the VW bus, going to be electric, but I don't see anything that's, filling that need yet. A little bit bigger with,
Yeah. To get more information, I would suggest you go to cleantechnica.com. And enter in their little search engine, I would enter recreational vehicles. Yeah. Because there have been several articles published in the last 2 or 3 years on that topic. But I can tell you that there will be an electric Jeep, an electric Hummer. It's possible now to get some of these vehicles already. And of course, I think you're absolutely right. If you could get an electric sand. One of those things that fly the flag up high and they drive over the sand dunes. You could get one of those to be electric. It would be quiet. It would be a lot of fun to drive. It would have great pickup, assuming you didn't spin the wheels too much. And I think it'd be just a wonderful vehicle. I'm quite certain that somebody will be producing one of those soon if they're not already doing it.
Okay.
Phil,
keep watching.
I wanted to really thank you. I do have a quick question. I'm currently reading Drawdown. Are you familiar with that book?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. It's a fabulous book.
He states that fossil fuel is half of our global warming problem. Is that correct? Am I remembering that correct?
Well, I think so. There are really several components. The fossil fuels are being used to make electricity now. We already talked about that. They're being used for transportation fuels. and they're being used for space heat and of course for some manufacturing. There are still, believe it or not, coal-fired steel plants around the world. The heat to make steel out of iron ore is still being done with coal or natural gas. All that has to stop, of course. But the other half, and I think the half is about right. The other half is our farming practices. We're extremely wasteful when it comes to farming, and that's one reason why those radical lefties are telling us to eat less meat, because meat is the most wasteful of all the ways of using our farmland. To feed cattle, I forget the exact numbers, but it takes the amount of food that it would take to feed us takes many, many times that much in order to feed the cattle that we then get a steak out of. And so reducing our meat input is going to be important. Of course, replanting forests around the world, all those things are a big chunk of the other half.
Yeah, I got that we are eating double the beef that we should be eating and double the protein. And so I told my wife this morning that I'm going to start eating plant food. She laughed at me.
Yeah, right. Well, look, I still like a steak now and then. I eat a lot less beef than I used to. But you're right. Most of us eat way more of that very rich protein and fat food than we need. I would commend to you, I don't own any of it, but I'd commend to you the two big manufacturers of plant-based meat substitute, the Impossible Burger people, and the other one, the name of which is escaping me right now. I think those stocks are going to go really well.
Yeah, Beyond Beef.
Beyond Beef, that's it. Thank you, Beyond Beef. I think they're going to do really well because I've tried them. I bought a Burger King Whopper that was made with one of those two, and I couldn't taste the difference. It tasted the same to me. So I expect those are going to do real well in the future. Well,
Drawdown says that's the other half of the problem.
Oh yeah.
With our farm production, our land use, our eating habits, everything related to eating too much food, eating the wrong foods.
Well, look, getting back to our theme, what can we do personally to help? We can drive electric vehicles, we can eat less meat, we can insulate our houses, we can use electricity to heat them rather than natural gas. I mean, there's a whole variety of things that we can personally do. And when you do those things, you send a market signal. When one of the reasons why Ford and General Motors and all the other big car companies in Europe and other places are starting to make electric vehicles is because Tesla is eating their lunch. Tesla sold more Model S's, that big luxury car, than BMW and Mercedes and some of the others put together, and they're beginning to feel it. So it isn't just an affectation to get an electric car rather than a gasoline powered one. You actually send a market signal to those big companies that, look, you're not going to sell those gasoline powered cars anymore. You better get on the program and start selling electric. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate the chance to do it. And I'm hoping that I'll be invited, hint, hint, to talk to other Rotary clubs in the area.
It was a very interesting program, Phil. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. All righty.
Yes,
bye-bye.
Thanks tons, Phil. This is great. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Phil. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Grace, too, for all your wonderful techie support.
You're
Yes.
welcome. You're very
You
welcome.
do a fantastic
Thanks,
job.
Phil and Grace.
Well, thanks.
Thanks, Linda.
We should post this for people that didn't get to see it somehow.